Hi, thank you for coming tonight. We appreciate that you're here. If you are not here for the marijuana, alcohol, beverages, and tobacco presentation, then you're in the wrong room. For the rest of you that are in the right room, we really, really do appreciate your time. We understand that your time is valuable, and you're here because you're interested in learning about the regulatory considerations around these three topics. So thank you for spending your evening with us. To those who are joining us on Zoom, we also appreciate that you've made the time and the commitment and you've registered for our Zoom. So for those who are joining us online, we really appreciate it. We've got about 30 people who registered today on Zoom. Our session tonight is going to begin with a really short, brief presentation about marijuana. And then we're going to go into the liquor and tobacco presentation. And so that way you'll get that information. If you're here for just one topic, you're not going to be sitting through a long presentation on one of the topics, hopefully. Your input is going to be gathered via the comment cards that you grabbed when you came into the room. And for those who are on Zoom, their feedback is going to be dropped in the chat. And what we will do is if you have a question that comes up on that comment card, please mark it as a question. And if you're going to drop it into the chat, mark it as a question. Because if we can answer your question before you leave tonight, we want to make sure that happens for both people who are in the room and on the Zoom. Is there anybody who's missing a comment card that's going to need one tonight in the room? Okay, we're good. And if you run out and you need another one because you take copious amounts of notes, that's fine too. The benefit of using the comment card or the chat is you guys can, as they're presenting, write down your thoughts because that might spark something in your mind. And you can kind of think through what it is that is on your mind. So hopefully that will help us tonight. We have this room the presentation scheduled until 6:30, but we have this room until 7. At 7, we have a hard stop. So if we have to go over, we can go over, but at 7 o'clock, we do need to leave. And we really appreciate everyone respecting that because of facilities and everybody at play that's got to come in. If you need to go to the bathroom during the presentation, for those who are in person, the bathroom's just outside the doors and to the left. Cell phones. If you've got your cell phone on you, can you please make sure that it's on silent? We appreciate that. We had a meeting last night and several cell phones went off in the meeting. And so that's it for housekeeping items. I want to introduce our panelists tonight. With us, we have Brett Stewart, Assistant to the City Manager. He is our program manager on this project. We've got Ashley McDonald, our City Clerk. She is also she's in charge of liquor licensing, correct? And then Troy Bliss, he is our planning manager. And Michael Bailey, our assistant city attorney. Not joining us tonight, but very valuable to this team, has been Emily DeLima. She's a police officer with the Loveland Police Department, and we've appreciated all of her work and expertise on this project and want to recognize that she's been a very valuable part of this team. So through this, if you hear something that you don't necessarily agree with, if we can ask you to just refrain until the end of the presentation, we're going to try and get through this as quickly as possible because your time is very valuable and we respect that your time is really valuable. So we're going to try to get through the presentation before we move on to the questions and comments. If on the comment card or in the chat, you've marked something as a question, and we're going to bring all of those up here and we're going to try and see if we can answer them. But we're going to moderate it up here to try and be respectful of everybody's time. This is our agenda for the presentation tonight. We're going to do an introduction and then we're going to go over the marijuana part of it, then the liquor and tobacco part, and then that's where we're going to collect all of your feedback. And now I'm going to hand it over to Brett Stewart. He's going to go over slides for marijuana and start with a timeline and some background.
Thank you, Kim. And thanks everyone for being here. I really appreciate all of you taking the time out of your evenings to learn a little bit more about how we're going to move forward with marijuana regulations in the city of Loveland and tobacco and liquor. So just to start, there was a question asked earlier about what is the intent of today's meeting. And so as we're moving forward with developing these regulations for the city of Loveland, we want to make sure that the community is heard and it gets the chance to share some feedback, not just because we want to make sure that we're doing the right, creating the right product, but that you could have some buy-in and how we want to move forward with this. You'll see in the timeline there when this process started. And this all began in November 2024 when ballot measures 2F and 2H passed. Ballot measure 2F was the one that increased the excise tax on marijuana. And then ballot measure 2H was the one that repealed chapters 7.60 and 7.65, which banned retail or medical marijuana in the year 2010 when it was banned by the city council at that time. So as we've been moving forward with this process, we've done a lot of benchmarking. We have a really great team here. As Kim mentioned, we've been working with the clerk's office, the Loveland Police Department, the attorney's office, development services, and more to really make sure these regulations are a one and done thing. We want to make sure that we don't have to come back to the table. Something that we learned from a lot of different communities that have engaged in this in the past is that they've made some mistakes. There's been moratoriums in places, there's been some chaos. And so what we wanted to do is to make sure that these are something that can be completed and that we can make sure that the community, the businesses, and the city council are all happy with the product. So that's why the process has taken the time it has. We've said from the very beginning, this will probably take almost a year, and we're 8 months into it, and we've kind of committed to the January 2026 date to start beginning applications. And the ballot measure, you'll notice, is a little unique from any other community in that we had in 2010 a series of businesses that were banned at the time that we were given a 120-day ability to reapply again, to be first in the line to reapply per the ballot language. So we're going to follow that and make sure that anyone in 2010 that was a license holder has the ability to apply again within the first 120 days before it opens up to anyone in the city. And so you'll see as we move forward with the stakeholder meetings, we had a meeting with some of the previous stakeholders and interested parties in February. A lot of them are here today. It's good to see all of you. We also had our city council study session on this topic on April 22nd. And if you haven't had a chance to look at that presentation or watch that meeting regarding marijuana, there's a lot of really good insight into that meeting. So a lot of the information you hear today is really going to be regurgitated from that meeting. And that meeting, in that study session, the council gave us a lot of good direction on how we want to move forward with the regulations. And we'll get to share that in just a little bit. And so today we are in our community meeting to kind of, listen, get some feedback so that we can make sure that we're doing this correctly. And then ultimately going into the next slide for the next steps, we'll be going to city council. Right now on the rolling calendar online, there's 2 dates for the 2 readings, October 21st and November 4th. Just before that, we'll be going to the Planning Commission on September 8th to share specific to the code changes, and that'll be specific to zoning. But then once we move forward with Planning Commission, and once council ultimately passes the regulations by 2 readings, the clerk's office, and Ashley will talk more about it later, we'll have pre-application meetings. And then we're set for our January 2026 date to start beginning applications to move that process forward so that the businesses can start to get applied and we can get those into the city of Loveland. So with that, I will pass it on to Troy.
Thank you, Brett. Appreciate that. Good evening, everyone. Troy Bliss again with the City of Loveland Current Planning Office. I'm here to share with you some information relative to zoning and land use regulations that we're looking to take forward for consideration on marijuana retail sales and medical use. Based upon what we heard at our previous community meeting that Brett mentioned in February, and also our study session that we had with City Council, we have presented a proposal where the uses themselves would be permissible under our industrial and business zones throughout the community. And in a moment here, you're going to see a slide that will depict where those areas generally sit throughout the city of Loveland. That will entail a application that would have to be submitted to the current planning office for land use entitlements. And generally what that would look like is an application that would be reviewed in conformance with the Marijuana Enforcement Division standards. So those are things like certain setbacks from these types of facilities, from businesses, schools, childcare facilities, those kinds of things. And as part of that application process, there would also be an expectation to hold a neighborhood meeting. So in order to get the use approved and move on to seeking your license, you would work with the current planning office in holding that neighborhood meeting to share the proposal with the surrounding area. Is it just this here that So this is that map I was talking to you all about in terms of the areas throughout Loveland where we have both the industrial and commercial zones. So those are primarily going to be along some of your major corridors like Highway 287, Highway 34, and then some pockets of areas that are, of course, to the northwest and to the northeast of the community. Again, the expectation being that those would be opportunities where if you found a suitable location, you could come to the City of Loveland Current Planning Office and we could help you through the application process for seeking land use entitlements. The circles that you see with potential locations surrounding them are just meant to represent those MED setbacks that would be in place, the 1,000-foot setback. So this is just a snapshot in what could potentially play out in terms of possible locations for these types of businesses. Like I said, the expectation would be that zoning approval would need to be in place before you can move forward with obtaining your license. And to that point, I'll turn it over to Ashley and she can kind of get into what that licensure would look like.
Thank you, Troy. So in the beginning, there were discussions brought to council regarding licensing caps, and what staff presented to council regarding licensing caps were different thresholds that were needed for staffing in order to efficiently process these applications. When council was asked about establishing a cap, they basically put that ownership back on the clerk's office to establish. So to talk about the caps portion, the clerk's office is not interested in presenting any sort of capping requirement on the community. Instead, during the conversation with council, what they wanted to see was what a 1 mile distancing separation between marijuana stores looked like. And that aligns similar with our gaming and pawn code requirements. We don't allow more than one pawn facility to be within a mile of each other. So the map that you have on the table in front of you shows, now this is a very much if-then scenario, right? You have a lot of Venn diagrams in front of you. So if, for instance, you pick one location and one of the other circles is touching that location, that then would prohibit a store from opening within 1 mile of from where you're located. So I do have a board over here where I can kind of show some examples of that. But what the clerk's office did is we did an exercise where we did a multitude of scenarios. So we started with each of the different bubbles to look at if a marijuana store opened up here, then how many potential stores could open up in the community. And in this scenario, the if then, we found that the minimum amount of stores that could open up in the community would be in the 4 to 5 range. And there is one scenario in here where there could be up to 11 stores that could open within Loveland and all be within that mile requirement and meet the MED. So we believe that through that 1 mile distancing requirement recommended by council, natural caps will be in place that will give the market the ability to create natural caps. The marijuana application. So we presented a couple of options to council. It was a close discussion, but they decided that they would prefer the first come, first serve based off of legally completed application process. We'll be honoring the first 120 days to prior City of Loveland licensee holders based on the voter approved ballot language. So if you were a prior licensee holder in Loveland, you get first come, first serve for 120 days. So in our application process, over here on this screen, you can see up this big guy over here, the step-by-step application process that we're looking at. And we did it in comparison to the liquor licensing application process overlaid with the state licensing application, sales tax licensing application process to show really how much time it takes and additional steps marijuana applicants have to go through in order to get their license approved. The clerk's office is not implementing any additional local requirements beyond the mile distancing requirement. And the community neighborhood meeting. So council did ask that in the application process that marijuana licensee holders hold some sort of community or neighborhood meeting. And people can speak in for of or against, but those results would be presented in front of the authority. Whether you have more in for or against, it doesn't necessarily weigh against the application. They just want to see that you have had a conversation with the neighbors, that the neighbors are aware that a marijuana facility is opening, and make sure that you're addressing any needs or concerns that they have about security or operations, or how you're going to be a good neighbor. Michael's going to talk a little bit about hours of operation.
Yeah, good evening, folks. Michael Bailey. Yes, we're, as Ashley said, we're not looking to impose a much stricter regime on the City of Loveland's sale of marijuana. We are currently basing our hours of operation based on the recommendation we received from the council. So that's looking like an 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. hours of operation. That pursuant to the Marijuana Enforcement Division, the rules published by the state, there are no sales. It's not legal to have sales of marijuana products or marijuana between the hours of 12 a.m. and 8 a.m. So nothing between midnight and 8 a.m. the next day. We're looking at these 8 to 10 hours as a reasonable compromise, a reasonable hour of operation given the most common amount of sales. But we are leaving a couple of hours off the table based on our recommendations received from the City Council.
Right into alcohol, beverages, and tobacco. So I started with the city in January of this year, and during that time, the city had begun reviewing state changes or changes to the local licensing code for liquor and tobacco, primarily based off of a new state law that had passed. At that time, tobacco licensing and currently is located in a completely different section of the code than liquor licensing. So one of the biggest changes that we presented in the spring of this year was moving the tobacco licensing requirements into the same chapter of liquor licensing. During that process, we failed to meet with all of you and speak with the business owners about those state law changes that were coming and the big move for liquor and tobacco licensing out of Title V into Title VIII. So first and foremost, the clerk's office wants to apologize for our misstep in not communicating with the community about those changes. So a majority of the red line changes for tobacco licensing is moving it from one title to another. And this evening, we're going to talk about the local licensing requirements that are going to change. Our objectives in the clerk office with licensing requirements and changes is to align with the state to prevent confusion. Because when licensee holders hold liquor licenses in other communities that align with the state law, and then they come to Loveland and ours conflicts, that makes it confusing for applicants to have a good customer service experience. So we want to streamline our processes to promote better customer service. And we also want to improve safety and well-being in our community. One of the common conversations that I heard when I started through the Youth Advisory Commission and through our municipal court system is that there is an issue in Loveland with youth access to vape products. So taking all of those community conversations and concerns into consideration can sometimes influence how we present changes to our code. So we're here this evening to share with you our concerns and ask you to provide input how we can prevent youth from getting access to these vape products. So here are some statistics about the current tobacco license pass-fail rate when we're doing inspections. A lot of times we observe that there are issues present, but licensees remedy the issues without having to have a show cause. We do have a good portion of the community that passes without issues and a very small percent that fail. You'll see let's see, that can be your right. The two statistics I wanted to highlight there is the reasons why people fail an inspection in the community. And it's either for not having a certificate of occupancy posted or having a tax, paying their sales tax on time. Certificate of occupancy is important. That's an important fire code requirement. And making sure that those are posted are extremely important for safety. So some of the changes that we are proposing to tobacco licensing is moving a lot of it from Title V to Title VIII, so it's easier to find. We want to align the renewal processes to be similar to that of liquor licensing, one of those being the annual renewal process. It's going to be a huge benefit to our tobacco licensee holders. What this means is that your annual renewal will no longer be on January 1. Now, the downside is that we have asked to implement penalties for late filings, but those late filings won't go into effect truly until 2028. Because during 2026, we will need time to work with those licensee holders to establish that new renewal period, right? So the clerk's office is going to have to extend significant grace periods for licensee holders during that transition period so that maybe those that have both a liquor license and a tobacco license, instead of having to reapply every year at different times, you can align those to apply at the same time. Additionally, right now, if a tobacco license expires, it's dead in the water. With the new code that we're proposing, it would align closer with the liquor license so that as you're going through that renewal period, or if your license has expired and you have a meeting coming up with the authority, you can continue to sell. Additionally, in the tobacco code, we've implemented guidelines to limit underage access with some additional sign regulations and compliance checks. Here are some similar statistics about our liquor compliance checks. Most come into voluntary compliance, and a very, very small amount of the community is failed or denied a liquor license. Since my time, I don't believe we have revoked a license. Most reasons for failure are failure to remit sales tax license and then failure to provide your certificate of occupancy during inspection. I'm going to turn it over to Michael to talk a little bit about the changes to the state for the liquor licensing requirements.
Right. So we're responding to changes at the state level, the Colorado revised statutes governing the sale of alcohol, the licensing of alcohol beverages. So the reason we're seeing a lot of the changes in the local code is really just coming aligned with the state's regulations. So that's kind of the top of the list for what changes we're making. Additionally, though, we're looking for ways to try to improve the way that we can interact with businesses, the way that businesses can kind of keep a handle on their business of safely serving the community. So these are some things that help us to more safely ensure that alcohol is sold and served in the community. We are looking to implement a requirement that a service or a licensee report any violations that occur on the premises. This is a similar code section to what Fort Collins has. And realistically, we just want to make sure that, again, that our businesses are safely operating, that the police are involved when there are violations, when there are incidents that are unsafe. So that's the primary driver for that. We're also changing the hours of tasting permits, state mandated. Again, that's just what the state says, so 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. And we're looking to improve the way our special event permits and those type of events, thinking like the downtown concert series, the corn roast, all these sorts of special events that have special liquor license permits. We're looking to implement a requirement that there is a clearer, more defined boundary around the areas where alcohol is allowed. And the reason we're doing that is based on prior experience with other events in the past. We've noticed police department's been able to track down a number of folks leaving out of those permitted areas with alcoholic drinks. We've witnessed some incidents involving patrons of those events, possibly getting intoxicated at those events, leaving and causing problems elsewhere. So our goal is to create a firmer or a more defined boundary around the specially permitted areas. That doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a physical boundary, but it's going to either require something to the effect of a physical boundary or increased security to prevent folks, again, from taking alcohol off of the permitted area and folks from, going out and causing problems outside of the area. Additionally, we're asking for increased training requirements. We want to make sure that everyone here in the city is able to safely serve alcohol to the community. So the Loveland Police Department offers classes on safe alcohol service. Obviously, there's a number of outlets offered through the state as well. But we're just wanting to make sure that everyone who is involved in the sale and service of alcohol here in the city is doing so safely. So we're asking to make sure that these are that folks are getting the proper training to do that. So I think that's the end of our presentation, and I'll turn that over to Kim.
Yeah, I promised a short presentation. All right, so at this time, and hopefully you were thinking through the presentation and some things came to mind. That's what those comment cards are for, if you're in person. And again, we've got folks joining us online, and hopefully those folks are dropping their thoughts and their feedback into the comments online. In a minute, I'm going to come around and collect those. If you've got a question, we're going to see if we can answer those questions tonight. So please mark your comment card with question. The other thing that I'd like to ask is if you didn't sign in, if you want to stay in touch, if we've got an update on what's happening on this issue, make sure that we have a way to get in touch with you that you are interested in additional further feedback. So on the comment card, we have a way for you to put your email address, your name and your email address, and that way we can keep you apprised as we continue to go through this process and as we have updates. So certainly make sure that we have a way to get in touch with you. And so again, if you're joining us on Zoom, go ahead and drop some of those questions and thoughts in the chat. And if you're ready for me to grab that, I can come around. Go ahead and just raise your hand and I'll grab that.
So while everyone's writing their questions, there was one question that I saw online that was sent to me. The question was, how many past licensees meet the criteria required to be able to apply during the 120 early window? So there is in the April 22nd. So the short answer is it's between 8 and 10 right now. The long answer is you'll find at the April 22nd, 2025 study session presentation, there's an attachment with a list of businesses that are eligible and are those previous license holders. There's about 20 businesses that we have on file that were banned in 2010. And we reached out to a list. There's about, some of them have multiple license holders. So there's a list of around 40. But when we did our outreach, most of those just they've no longer are no longer interested or have moved elsewhere. So we have a list of about I would say a total of 10. We did have 13, but a few have decided they're not going to apply anymore. So it's between 8 and 10. But the follow up to that is how many are actually going to apply, and that's hard to determine. That really is hard to determine. I know there's a few that are very serious in applying. But that's just we'll have to see who applies once it's open in January.
So someone had asked the question, are the slides going to be available? And actually, we do have a team that is videotaping this tonight. And so we have our lovegov.org/TV web stream that you can get video on demand at. And so what I'd like to say is I would anticipate it no later than noon on Monday, or sorry, noon on Tuesday. I forgot it's a holiday weekend. So no later than noon on Tuesday will we post it for rebroadcast for the web stream. And then you can also request the link, or we'll also put it on YouTube, our YouTube channel. So are the slides going to be available? This whole presentation will be available. Okay, the question is including the flow chart. So if you're joining us on Zoom, we have an attachment for the flow chart. And if you are here in person, you can actually go up to that flow chart at the end of the session and see it up close. And then I need to think through how we can maybe email it. I imagine we're going to be including this in our public meeting packets moving forward. Is that correct? That the flow chart will be in our public meeting packets moving forward?
Yeah, it's subject to change. So know that based off of feedback that we gather from these and between council, this information is subject to change until final adoption.
And that's actually brings up another point that we failed to mention, which was the 1 mile Venn diagram is hypothetical, right? Because between now and somebody being licensed, you could have a child care facility that may change how that 1 mile Venn diagram example plays out for us. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So here's a good question. When is the earliest CRT applications can be submitted? I don't know what a CRT application is, though.
I'm happy to address that. That would be akin to a pre-application meeting through the planning office to consider a land use entitlement. And so as it stands right now, we don't have anything in place to really have a frank discussion with somebody looking to open up a facility like that because we don't have any regulations in place. Our anticipation is once these are adopted, we would be in a position to then start taking in concept review applications or pre-applications through the current planning, talk to you about what that application, that land use application process looks like. Hopefully that responds to the question then.
I see a thumbs up. Okay. All right. We have a question from online. How many companies had licenses for cannabis retail in 2010?
13. I know I might have said 20 a few moments ago. Let me just clarify. It's 13 businesses. So we have 13 businesses that were part of the City of Loveland, had medical licenses at the time, and then we had multiple license holders in the 40s. So just to clarify, 13.
We also have a question online that's more of a police department related question, and I don't have an answer for this tonight, but I certainly want to express that we've gotten this question. Would the TIP training that the Loveland Police perform meet the requirements for the new safe alcohol service training that is being proposed? But I kind of see
I
an
can provide
answer.
some clarification on that. So the program put on through the Loveland Police Department does satisfy our training requirement. What I want to clarify for liquor licensee holders is the old TIPS certification that used to be in existence. That doesn't, like, the state doesn't recognize that anymore. So all of that language is changing. So what liquor licensee holders need to know about our training program is that we will accept others, but other people may not accept ours. So you can take our safe alcohol server training here through the Loveland Police Department, but know that that training certificate may not be accepted in another jurisdiction.
We have another online question, and so I'm going to throw this to the panel. As far as the application fee goes, if you're not selected, will any of those fees be refundable?
That's absolutely something that we can take into consideration as we're developing the fee schedule and the final regulations. That kind of input tonight is what we're looking for from you.
Okay, here's another online one that I don't know if we've addressed. How many past licenses meet the criteria required to be able to apply during the 120-day early window? I'm willing to bet that we can't answer that on the fly because we'd have to reference those applications, and we just don't have that ability because this is a new effort. So the question, how many past licensees meet the criteria? We aren't able to answer that question.
And just to quickly comment for marijuana license, for the previous license holders, just to clarify, anyone who was a license holder from 2010, you have the ability to apply first within the first 120 days. It doesn't guarantee that you'll get your application approved. It's still, you have to go through essentially the new process because just they're from 2010, so they are rather outdated. But it does give you the ability to apply first. So that's just to clarify that, because I know sometimes a few questions pop up there.
All right, we have a hold on one second, because I have to also keep in mind that there's folks in Zoom that cannot hear you right now, and we want to make sure that they have a consistent experience with you in alignment. So, and we aren't able to allow them to speak, so we need to provide a consistency between the in-person and on Zoom. Could I give you another sheet to write your question down? You have one. All right, I'm going to be collecting more questions here in just a second. So continue to write those questions and your feedback down, because as we're answering questions, folks might have a thought in their head that needs clarifying. And we're going to continue to sit here and go through this until at least 6:30. But again, we do have the room until 7. And right now it's at 6:10. So we are in, I think, good shape for you guys to think through, put those down, and let's go over those. So this question, I hope I represent this correctly. Are cultivation facilities or MIP licenses going to be granted? Do they need to be connected to retail? Will there be any processing restrictions? And if we can't answer these tonight, where these go, so that you know what we do with these, is these go into consideration as we're making our next draft update. So So we may not have all the answers,
I can
but
answer those questions.
you can
Yep,
answer
I
that?
can answer those questions. I
All
might need you
right.
to repeat the second one, but I can
Okay.
answer the first one for sure.
So let's start with the
So,
first. So let me remind folks what the first was.
Please do.
You're so good. All right. Are cultivation facilities or MIP licenses going to be granted?
The answer to that question is no. We are only accepting medical and retail licenses. We're looking at a licensing application process that is it doesn't matter to us if you're medical or retail. We just want you to fill out the license and turn it into the state. And then really the big difference for us then is the sales tax remittance piece, right? So there may be little nuances for security and for you guys between the medical and the retail side, but on the actual licensing and application processing side, we're having a hard time finding any big difference between the paperwork and the processing piece that we're looking at with our local licensing requirements. So that's where we're excited to look at. We started by looking at the Fort Collins code, and then we're also looking at the Aurora code to see what we can do to take all of the great pieces from those two codes to really create a streamlined application process with as little paperwork as possible. No production, no cultivation, no manufacturing, just retail and medical, and then no delivery.
Okay, and then there was a second part to that question, and I appreciate that you were like, let's break this out, because that's certainly helpful for, I think, me and hopefully those that are in the room and on Zoom. Do they need to be connected to retail, and will there be any processing restrictions? Although I feel like...
So I won't speak to the processing restrictions because we're not doing processing, but are we going to require a medical to have a retail or a retail to have a medical? And no. No cultivation. No cultivation.
Yeah.
You'll have to cultivate at another location.
Yeah, cultivation is one of those areas where you need to have legally included in the ballot language. It wasn't included in the ballot language. So yeah.
Okay. I don't believe we've answered this one yet. If the previously banned owners apply and the locations they select make it so that there are no more qualifiable locations for the zoning restrictions, will you let us know before the general public applies?
So I'll take this one, Brett. So through the application process that we're creating, through the requirement to have the pre-application meeting, that's going to be critical for those licensee holders that existed before to set yourself up for success and determine if you meet the current criteria to be able to apply. So then by the end of that 120-day period, anybody that was a prior licensee holder that wants to try and reapply will have an opportunity to meet with the clerk's office and walk through the steps. And hopefully then you'll either be able to open up where you were previously, or we can help identify where outside, somebody else's application, or we want to help you work through that process where we can, but we do have limitations on what we'll be able to approve. So I want to be very clear that there's no guarantee of grandfathering, but you do get first stab at submitting an application to get into the market.
All right, I'm going to come around and collect more comment cards. Emily, if you can, if you need another one, please raise your hand. Again, our goal is to create a consistent experience for those who are online and those who are in person. We want to make sure that those online are able to hear the questions as they're spoken, and that we can answer those questions that we have the ability to answer. So if you have more, I'm going to come around and grab those, and you can raise your hand. If you need more forms, we'll get those to you.
And so while you're writing your questions that Kim will be collecting, there's another question online that I'll ask for the panel. Is there a window that a licensee who receives an application must open in after receiving their license? If so, what happens if they fail to open in time?
Yeah, I can answer that question, Brett. The code is still under development, but there is a trigger within that code that has a 1-year limitation. So we're not exactly sure where that falls yet exactly. If it's once you've received your approved application, you will have 1 year to open the doors, because we do know that there's significant hurdles for marijuana facilities that are trying to open a location in an existing facility and meet all of the building code and MED requirements. So we want to Right. So we want to try and give everybody a reasonable amount of time to open up shop, but we also can't leave those licenses out there open and unused perpetually.
Okay, so we've got another question, and this is one that came up back in February when we had our first marijuana stakeholder meeting, and so I know it's been discussed quite a bit. Will previous licensee facilities be grandfathered in or need to meet the new requirements? Are you asking marijuana, liquor, marijuana? Will previous licensed facilities, licensees, be grandfathered in or need to meet the new requirements?
They will need to meet the new requirements.
Okay, and then we have a question from the audience, and it is, we need a little clarification on it. So if it's okay, we're going to ask this person maybe to step aside so we can ask for some clarification on it and try and answer it for the room to the best of our ability. The question specifically is about council has not passed 67, 65. So we need to get some clarification so we can try and answer that. Okay, so we have the person who wrote that. And so he's just going to step aside, try and get some better clarification, and hopefully we can answer that for you. Okay, let's see. If you are not a previous owner, how will you know when you can apply?
On the city clerk's website, much like our liquor and tobacco licensing information, we'll be sure and provide some important timelines and updates, including application information, and then when the date opens up for people that weren't prior applicants to be able to apply. So we can include that information on our website, and once we have everything adopted and passed.
So status update on the website. Thank you, Ashley. Really appreciate that. And then do you need the location before applying?
Yes, you need to know where your location is, but the building does not have to be built yet. So you have to have, so up there on the process map, you have to have a location identified for the pre-application, and then you'll move through. We're going to allow for the community hearing piece, and then the official zoning verification to happen concurrently with the application process. So just know, like, we're building it all up so that you meet all of your requirements prior to getting to the authority hearing. So if you haven't met those requirements by the time we get to the authority for your marijuana license, you could be denied and then lose your spot. So then if the next legally complete application is in that hearing right behind you, they may take that spot. So that's where it's really important to make sure you have a complete and legal application during the process.
Our knowledge of this topic is really being tested tonight. So thank you guys for all of these great questions. We have a lot of these great questions coming in, and thank you for all of them. Thank you for your time tonight. What if more than one application comes in for the same area? What if we have more than one application come in for the same area? And if that's something that we need to consider for this, then that's an appropriate answer as well. Like, part of this is the feedback that helps us think through what we haven't thought through.
Sure. So like, what happens to the clerk's office if two pawn shops want to open up right next door to each other in a new business complex and they apply at the same time, right? Same situation. First complete and legal application. I mean, that's when it comes down to like the date and time stamps. So that's where it's really important to make sure you have a complete and legal application and like take those pre-application meetings seriously.
And Kim, if I can jump in, I'll address that question that I had to seek some clarification. The question we had from the audience was regarding the licensing authority having the authority to hear tobacco licensing matters. And since council has not passed ordinance 6765, the reason that the licensing authority also can hear tobacco licensing matters is under the current licensing code 5.45070 subsection B. An applicant has the right to appeal licensing administrator's denial of an application fee to the hearing officer that shall be appointed by the city manager. So that's the licensing authority that already serves for our alcohol licensing was appointed by the city manager to also hear tobacco licensing disputes.
Can we email the process flow chart after this meeting to folks who have provided their email addresses either by registering via Zoom or here in person on their comment card today?
So I'm all about information sharing, but inevitably, if I tell you that it's a draft and it's a work product, somebody in this room is going to hold me to it. So I prefer to not hand this information out to the public until it's been officially adopted by council. That way, if there's any processes or steps that change during the application flow chart period, it doesn't create any confusion or misinformation on the community. So this is really a preview and to kind of give you a visual of what that looks like. But we would be happy to publish a formal official one once the formal process has been adopted by council.
Can you sell your license after you are issued one down the line?
No, but you can transfer your license for a fee. You can follow, there's a transfer process similar to liquor and tobacco. So you can't sell your license or raffle off your license if you were a pre-person. You have to open your business, get your license, and then you can transfer your license to a new owner.
Hold on a
You
second.
can transfer your license.
The people online can't hear that question. Could we do
The
that?
question was, can you sell your marijuana license? You cannot sell your marijuana license, but you can transfer your marijuana license. So your business operations are your business. But if you want to transfer your marijuana license from one business owner to another, there is a process for that.
Okay, are there any other comment cards that I can come, feedback cards, questions? If you are uncomfortable with me saying that out loud and it's just general feedback, write it down. We'll collect that too, and we won't hold it against you or say it out loud. Just let me know that you don't want it said out loud. That's fine. Same if you're in the Zoom meeting on the chat. If you let us know that you don't want it asked out loud, that's okay too. But you know, we just want to make sure that anyone who has asked a question that, you know, if we've got an answer, we can at least address it or feedback. Okay, so yes, so just like we have, this is a good one, just like we have here where we've shared the PDF and there are people who can have a camera and they can take a picture of that. We have to share that with the folks on Zoom. So we have shared that with the folks on Zoom, but the reminder is it's a working draft. Nothing is adopted, and it's once it's adopted that it's official. So right now it's just for reference, and that is an excellent question. How can it be in the Zoom and how can it be up there? Because it is that working product. But again, we don't want you to think that that's the final, because this is input, and at the input stage, we're still drafting for presentation for the public meetings that it'll go before. Will there be any restrictions on the band owners regarding the ability to transfer licenses? Perhaps a time period that they have to own it, or a minimum percentage of ownership they have to hold long-term? Will there be any restrictions on the band owners regarding the ability to transfer these licenses? Perhaps a time period that they have to own it, or for a minimum percentage ownership they have to hold long-term?
We haven't really discussed any additional local licensing requirements for the transfer piece. Really, where the clerk's office is looking at the transfer applications is the burden of processing those applications. Ownership is very complicated with marijuana licensing applications, and there is a lot of review and time that goes into that part of the process. So where we're looking at lower fees to lower the burden of entry for licensee holders, where we're looking at where holders might see higher fees is maybe in the transfer of application piece. Otherwise, I don't think, Michael, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, we haven't talked about implementing any additional requirements for transfer. So if a prior licensee holder wanted to open up a marijuana facility, operate for 6 months, and they found out it was just too much work with the new regulations, they can transfer that application as long as they follow all of the requirements in the transfer application. So again, where we're looking at any sort of additional burden with the transfer process would be that as we're evaluating the fee schedule, the highest fee that marijuana licensee holders will likely look at is the transfer fee.
And that's correct. Yeah, we have not discussed adding any additional local regulations beyond the state's regulations on transfers of ownership for marijuana businesses.
And are there any other questions or feedback? We are at 6:30. But we certainly want to make a final call, and it sounds like we have another one online. And again, I can't say enough how much we appreciate your attendance tonight. It's super helpful. On the marijuana side, this was our second public stakeholder meeting. We had one back mid-February, and there were a lot of great questions that were asked, and we used that to help. And again, this time, there's a lot of great questions being asked, and we really appreciate that. All right, so this question says, are there going to be any requirements that applicants live in Loveland?
No.
That was an easy one, I think, for you.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I also want to thank our panelists and, the working group that has been working on this, trying to include, as many departments as possible that intersect with this topic as the regulations are developed. Look at it from the lens of a municipal expertise for what they can bring to the table in regards to what we heard previously and what we're hearing now. So we appreciate all of that as well. Okay, so I think we are done with our online questions, and we're done with our in-person questions. So that concludes our evening for tonight. If you do want to come up, we are going to have these up here for a little bit longer, but we do need to create a consistent experience for those who are in person and who are in Zoom. So if you have a question still, go ahead and write it down and give it to us. We would really appreciate that. And again, thank you so much for your participation tonight, and good night.